The sun was sinking low behind the line of trees, throwing long shadows across the fields and bathing the landscape in gold and crimson. The cicadas droned lazily, their chorus blending with the distant lowing of cattle and the cluck of chickens scratching in the dirt. Eleanor Grant, known simply as Ellie in the town, moved slowly but deliberately through her yard. Her weathered hands scattered feed into the coop, and the birds crowded eagerly, their wings fluttering. To anyone passing by, she was just an elderly farm woman going about her evening chores, her figure stooped slightly from years of hard work, her silver hair tied back beneath a worn scarf. The truth of who she was, however, was buried deep in the folds of her past. To those who once fought beside her, she was a name etched into legend, a sniper of such unerring precision and icy calm that entire enemy units whispered of her in dread. The townsfolk who occasionally passed down the dusty road saw none of this. They knew her only as the widow who kept mostly to herself, tending to her land with quiet determination. Many wondered how she managed the upkeep alone, but no one asked too many questions. She had an aura about her, a kind of silent strength that kept most from prying. At her age, most women would have sold their farms or moved in with children. Ellie had neither the inclination nor the need. The land was hers, the soil was her companion, and the solitude gave her peace. Peace, however, was not something the world granted freely. That evening, as twilight deepened and a cool breeze rustled through the crops, the distant roar of a truck engine shattered the calm. Ellie lifted her head, her sharp blue eyes narrowing. The sound was rough and aggressive, not the steady hum of a neighbor's tractor but the reckless rev of young men showing off. Dust plumes rose on the road, and soon headlights cut through the dusky air. The vehicle slowed as it reached her front gate. She stood still, her hand resting lightly on the handle of the feed bucket, every muscle of her body attentive though outwardly she appeared as calm as ever. The truck jerked to a stop, its tires crunching over gravel. Doors slammed, followed by raucous laughter. Ellie's jaw tightened. These boys weren't strangers, she had seen them before in town, swaggering outside the gas station, pushing smaller kids around, and boasting loudly about nothing at all. They were the kind of men who mistook cruelty for strength, who sought out easy prey to feed their sense of power. And now, it seemed, they had chosen her. The gate creaked and clanged as they kicked it open, the metallic echo grating in the stillness of the evening. Ellie didn't move, watching them swagger up the dirt path. Beer bottles clinked in their hands, one already half empty. The tallest, a broad-shouldered brute with a greasy ball cap turned backward, led the way. He kicked at the fence post, laughing as it rattled loose. Another hurled his bottle against the barn wall, glass shattering in a spray of shards that glimmered briefly before vanishing into shadow. "Looks like the old bat's got herself a nice place," one of them jeered, his voice thick with drink. "Bet she won't mind if we borrow a few chickens. Might even roast one tonight." Their laughter rang harsh against the quiet of the farm, a sound that stirred something long dormant inside Ellie. She set the feed bucket down, her back straightening. Decades melted away in an instant. She no longer saw just foolish young men trampling her land, she saw the opening moves of a hostile incursion. The habits drilled into her bones during years of service returned, automatic and precise. Step 1. Assess. Step 2. Plan. Step 3. Strike. She turned silently and walked toward her porch, each step measured, her breathing steady. To the intruders, she looked like she was retreating, perhaps running to call for help. They hollered after her, mocking her frailty, emboldened by what they thought was fear. But inside her farmhouse, Ellie moved with practiced efficiency. She locked the door with a quick turn of the bolt and crossed the creaking floorboards to her bedroom. Kneeling by the old oak chest beneath her bed, she drew out a long, slender case. Dust clung to the corners, but when she opened it, the contents gleamed like new. Her rifle lay inside, polished, cared for, waiting. She ran her fingers lightly along its barrel, her touch reverent. Memories flooded her, rain-soaked nights in foreign forests, the smell of gunpowder, the sound of whispered commands over the radio. This weapon was an extension of her, a piece of her history she had sworn to leave behind. Yet here it was again, summoned by necessity. The war had returned, not on distant soil, but to her very doorstep. Ellie checked the scope, the chamber, the weight in her hands. Her lips pressed into a thin line as she rose and moved to the upstairs window. Below, the young men prowled her yard like jackals, kicking over buckets and rattling the barn doors. She lowered the rifle into position, the cold metal resting against her cheek, her eye aligning with the scope. She had faced armed insurgents, mercenaries, and warlords. Compared to them, these boys were nothing. Still, they were dangerous in their recklessness, and she would not allow them to turn her home into their playground. The battlefield had found her once again, and she was ready. The barn rattled as the men pushed their way inside, their boots thudding against the wooden floor. Dust motes swirled in the dim light, disturbed by their careless movements. They kicked over buckets, spilling grain across the ground, and one of them knocked a pitchfork to the floor with a loud clang that startled the horses in the stalls. The animals shifted nervously, stamping and snorting. The sound only made the intruders laugh louder. "Hey, look at this place," one of them shouted, his voice echoing against the rafters. "Old lady's got more junk than a scrap yard. Bet half of it's older than we are." Another had found the chicken coop. He reached in, grabbing a squawking hen by the wings, holding it up like a trophy. The bird flapped and scratched furiously, feathers flying, but he only laughed, swinging it around until it clawed free and darted back inside the co-op. The man cursed and kicked at the wire mesh, sending it rocking. Their leader, Troy, stood near the center of the barn, cigarette hanging from his lips. He was bigger than the rest, his arms thick with muscle earned not from hard work but from hours in a gym, his bulk lending him a false sense of invincibility. He struck a match on the wall and lit his smoke, taking a long drag before tossing the match carelessly into a pile of straw. A faint wisp of smoke rose almost immediately. The others cheered as if it were a game, daring him to do more. "Where's the old hag hiding?" Troy called, his voice hard and cruel. "Bet she's cowering in her rocking chair, praying we don't take her whole farm tonight." The words carried out of the barn and into the yard, but they reached ears sharper than he could imagine. Upstairs, Ellie lay prone by her window, her rifle steady on the sill. The scope drew the world close, and through it, she could see every twitch of their faces, every careless movement. Her breathing slowed until it was barely there, her heart beating in a rhythm she knew well, the calm before a shot. Her finger tightened on the trigger. She didn't want to kill them, not unless they forced her hand, but she needed them to know they had chosen the wrong place, the wrong woman. With a single exhale, she squeezed. The rifle cracked, the shot tearing through the silence. Dirt exploded an inch from Troy's boot, spraying his jeans with dust and grit. He froze. The cigarette bobbed at his lips, nearly falling. His eyes darted downward, then up toward the farmhouse. The others followed his gaze, wide-eyed and suddenly sober. From the window came a voice, strong, sharp, and commanding. "The next one won't miss." The laughter died instantly. Even the animals seemed to quiet, as though they understood something deadly had entered the scene. Troy tried to hold on to his smirk, his pride unwilling to let fear take over. "She's bluffin'," he muttered, though his voice cracked. "Old woman probably couldn't hit a can at 10 feet. Another shot rang out before the words had settled. The cigarette burst from his mouth, shredded midair, the glowing ember scattering into the dirt. Troy staggered back, hand flying to his lips, his eyes wild. The men behind him jumped, their bravado evaporating like mist in the sun. "Drop what you're holding," Ellie called, her tone flat, without a hint of panic. "Step away from my barn. You've got 5 seconds before I decide you're not worth sparing." The silence that followed was suffocating. One of the younger men, barely out of his teens, swallowed hard and let the bottle in his hand fall. It shattered at his feet. Another backed toward the barn door, his eyes flicking between Ellie's window and Troy's face, waiting for a cue to run. Troy spat, trying to gather himself. "You think you can scare us, lady? We're not afraid of some." The rifle cracked again, this time splintering the wooden post of the barn not 2 inches from his head. Chips of wood rained down his shoulder. His words cut off, his jaw snapping shut. He raised his hands slowly, his bravado shattering completely in the face of precision that left no doubt. Ellie's breathing remained calm, her finger resting lightly on the trigger, her eye never leaving the scope. Each movement they made, every shift in their stance, was catalogued. She had been trained to end lives in silence, but here, she used her skill to preserve peace. She wanted them alive, but afraid. Afraid enough to never return. The younger men shuffled nervously, inching back toward the door. Their leader, stripped of his swagger, looked smaller now, the weight of his arrogance crumbling under the cold gaze of a sniper's scope. In that moment, they realized they hadn't come to torment a helpless farm woman. They had stumbled into the sights of someone who had faced death countless times and walked away each time victorious. The tension hung thick in the cooling evening air. Every heartbeat felt like thunder to the intruders, but to Ellie, time was steady, her patience infinite. The battlefield was hers now. The first to run was the smallest of the group, a skinny kid with a mop of dark hair who couldn't have been older than 19. He bolted from the barn like a spooked rabbit, nearly tripping over his own feet in his haste. The others stared for half a second, frozen by indecision, before the sight of his retreat cracked their fragile courage. Another followed, then another, until the barn that moments ago had echoed with drunken laughter was left nearly empty. Boots pounded against dirt, gravel scattered, and the sound of the pickup doors slamming shut split the night. Troy lingered, though not by choice. His pride anchored him in place even as his skin prickled with the weight of Ellie's crosshairs. His chest heaved with shallow breaths, his eyes darting toward the house, then to the rifle barrel gleaming faintly in the fading light. For a moment, he considered bluffing again, shouting something crude to save face, but the memory of the cigarette exploding from his lips silenced him. This woman didn't bluff, she never had. He could see it in the steadiness of her aim, in the way her voice carried not anger but certainty. "Leave," Ellie said, her tone low, unyielding. Troy's shoulders sagged, the last ember of defiance dying inside him. He backed away, step by step, his boots crunching against the gravel path until finally he turned and ran. By the time he reached the truck, the engine was already rumbling. With a squeal of tires and a spray of dirt, the pickup shot down the road, its taillights shrinking into the darkness until they vanished altogether. Ellie lowered her rifle slowly, her breathing still calm and even. She did not smile or curse or celebrate. There was nothing to celebrate. She had faced trouble, and she had ended it, the same way she always had, by staying precise, controlled, and unshaken. For her, this was not victory. It was necessity. The night air settled again. The cicadas picked up their chorus, as though nothing had happened. The horses in the barn shifted uneasily, but the threat was gone. Ellie pushed herself to her feet, the weight of years returning to her bones, heavier now than ever. She carried the rifle back to its case, laying it down gently, and for a moment her hand lingered on the smooth metal. A piece of her long-buried life had stirred tonight, and though it had protected her, it left her with a bitter taste. She had not wanted to be that woman again, but some parts of us never die. She stepped outside into the yard, the boards of the porch creaking beneath her boots. The faint smoke from the smoldering straw in the barn drifted into the air, and she strode across the yard to stamp it out with the heel of her boot. The fire died with little effort, but the scent of burned hay lingered. She paused there, listening to the quiet, scanning the tree line the way she had once scanned ridges and rooftops in faraway war zones. Her instincts never allowed her to believe danger was truly gone until every possibility was accounted for. Satisfied, she finally turned back to the house. The chickens clucked nervously as she passed, and she murmured to them, her voice softening. "Easy now, girls, it's over." She sprinkled a little extra feed into their co-op before shutting the door for the night. The animals, like soldiers after a skirmish, needed reassurance, a reminder that safety had returned. Ellie walked to the edge of her porch and lowered herself slowly into the rocking chair that had belonged to her mother. The wood creaked under her weight, the sound familiar and grounding. She stared out at the road, the dust still faint in the air from where the truck had sped away. Somewhere in town, those men would be telling their story, trying to twist it so they didn't look like cowards. But the truth would spread anyway. Word always spread. Soon, the town would whisper again about Eleanor Grant, the quiet farm widow who lived alone. Only this time, they would remember not just the woman who sold eggs at the market, but the soldier who could split a cigarette from a man's lips at 50 yards. The night grew darker, stars emerging above the fields in glittering clusters. Ellie rocked slowly, her eyes tracing the constellations. She thought of the soldiers she had served with, the ones who hadn't made it home. She thought of the oaths she had taken and the life she had built after leaving it all behind. She had wanted peace, and for the most part, she had found it. But tonight reminded her that peace was fragile, easily shattered by arrogance and cruelty. Still, she had no regrets. She had defended her land, her animals, her home. More importantly, she had defended her dignity. Age might have lined her face and bent her back, but the essence of who she was, the discipline, the focus, the will to survive, remained as sharp as her aim. Those boys had learned something tonight that they would carry for the rest of their lives. Some people are not to be underestimated. As the crickets sang and the breeze rustled the crops, Ellie finally allowed herself to close her eyes, her rifle now locked safely away. The war was over again, for now. Tomorrow she would wake with the sun, feed the animals, tend the land, and go about her day as though nothing had happened. But deep down, she knew if danger ever returned, she would be ready. Because she was Eleanor Grant, a farmer by choice, a sniper by destiny, and no one, no matter how young, reckless, or cruel, would ever take that from her. Would you like me to now create realistic image prompts for all 3 scenes together so the story can be visualized clearly?